Hi, Ladybugs. So today I thought we'd discuss the history of dolls, just because I find history very interesting. So here's a doll from the 1870s. It was a European doll. She's pretty. But dolls weren't always like playthings. There was religious dolls and ceremonial dolls, and dolls go back. In fact, I was reading this thing on Wiki that basically said that dolls started getting manufactured in the 15th century, which I think is really interesting because you think back in the 15th century, that was the 1400s, and to think that they could have been manufacturing dolls, not just making them, but dolls have been made from everything like clay, stone, wood, bone, ivory, leather, wax, cloth, grass. I mean, people have been making dolls out of different materials for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's pretty amazing. The earliest dolls existed. One of the things I saw was that the earliest dolls existed. Hold on, I saw something that I found really interesting. I want to say it was like 8,000 BC. I saw that they, let me see. Yeah. The rich history of Japanese dolls dates back to the Dogu figures, 8,000 to 200 BCE, and the Hanawa funerary figures, 300 to 600 AD. That's pretty amazing. Here's an example of some of the Japanese dolls. I just thought that 8,000 BCE, if you think about how long ago that was, and they had dolls back then, that's pretty cool. And those were Japanese dolls. The 11th century, it wasn't until the 11th century that dolls were used as playthings as well as protection and in religious ceremonies. Before that, they were more used for religious ceremonies and like statues more than they were used as playthings. There's something called the Daruma dolls, are spherical dolls with red bodies and white faces without pupils. That's pretty cool. There's also effigy dolls, which are used for funeral purposes. I mean, it goes on and on and on. Here's a Greenlandic Inuit doll. Doesn't have a face, but it's like the basic shape of a person. That's pretty cool. And that one was made out of corn husks, which I thought was really cool. And then here's like the Russian, I don't know what this word is, Matryoshka dolls. But anyway, the dolls that fit inside each other, those are pretty cool. The Russian dolls, those are pretty cool. It says, let's learn about those. The Russian dolls consisted of a set of hollow wooden figurines that open up and nest inside each other. That's what they were called, the nesting dolls. They typically portray traditional peasants, and the first set was carved and painted in 1890. In Germany, clay dolls have been documented as far back as the 13th century, and wooden dolls making wooden dolls from the 15th century. Beginning about in the 15th century, increasingly elaborate dolls were made for nativity displays, chiefly in Italy. Dolls with detailed fashionable clothes were sold in France in the 16th century, though their bodies were often crudely constructed. I think that's kind of cool. And puppets were a big thing, too. You know, puppets were always real big in all different, for, decoration. But here's a doll from 1920. This is a composite doll with a porcelain head. Pretty cool. Growing up, I had one of my mom's composite dolls, but she got rid of it when she moved. Paper dolls have been around for another thing that's been around for centuries. Paper dolls are pretty awesome. And here's the very first Barbie dolls from 1959. Those are pretty cool. Sorry, I touched something. Hold on. There we go. Do any of you guys collect Barbie dolls or ever been into Barbie dolls? And then on here, they even show a Reborn doll. This is pretty cool. Look. So I just thought I'd get into that history, a little bit, because I thought that was really cool. In fact, dolls and other things that, so basically, like the way that dolls, from what I understand, the way that dolls and other toys were developed, I just love Chalet in this outfit. She looks so cute. I just love her in this outfit that we put on her in the last video. She looks so cute. That basically toys were made to emulate adult activities as a way not only to entertain children, but to train them for adult things. So like you'd have like a saw that a kid was, not a real saw, but like a wooden saw that a kid was playing with, or a hammer. Like we even have like the toy lawn mowers, the, the cleaning sets, the toy kitchens, and all of that is to like not only entertain the child, but to prepare the child for adult activities. And I think that's really cool. But that's how playing originally got started, was that it was a way to get children ready for what was coming in the future. And I think, I always thought that was pretty cool. And you look at all the sets that we have now that basically get kids ready for the future. And it's all like, stuff that they'll have to do in the future, like a play kitchen, cleaning sets, yard sets. I mean, there are some toys that don't really have any value to teach for the future, but most toys do have a value to teach for the future. And I think that's pretty cool. We're going to put this blue dress on one of my dolls because I just love this blue dress. I think it's so pretty. So that's how like dolls got started. And then the cool thing is that even though, now they're made out of vinyl, back in the day, they could have been made out of anything. Let's do Nala. I mean, they were made out, even out of grass and cloth because, that's what they had available. And they would make dolls for their kids. So I think that's really cool. If you ever get a chance, read some articles about the history of dolls, because it's actually really cool when you look at the history of dolls and how far back they've had dolls, Think about it, 8,000 BCE. We're talking like caveman era, like that's a long time ago. And even then they saw the value and the benefit with kids playing with toys and emulating, for little girls anyway, emulating motherhood, which is what dolls were originally intended to do. They were to emulate motherhood and let the child sort of have a glimpse into what the mother does, which I think is really cool. And it prepares them for the future. I don't think there's anything wrong with boys playing with dolls, because I think in general, boys who play with baby dolls become really good parents, really good fathers. I don't think that there's any harm there. Just like I don't think there's any harm in a little girl playing with a plastic tool bench. I don't think there's any harm with that either. I think that in general, gender-based toys got their design based on gender roles in society. And that when, as gender roles became less and less rigid, like women staying home with the children and stuff like that, that's when people started realizing that there was benefit to little boys playing with dolls and little girls playing with trucks. So it's not completely unexpected that other times in our planet's history would have issues with boys playing with dolls, because back in those days, boys didn't take care of the children, so there really was no benefit. But nowadays, as we all know, gender roles are incredibly loose, and there really aren't any gender roles. There are many, many wonderful fathers who stay home and raise their children while the mother works. And there are many women who work in what used to be considered a male job, like construction and things like that. So I think with the times, the ideas about toys have changed. And I think that's a good thing, because I think even if a father is going to go to work and be the provider and not really, have a whole lot of raising the children, I still think he needs to understand how to be a good father and how to be nurturing. And I think dolls provide that for little boys, I don't think there's anything wrong with a little boy learning how to take care of a baby or how to, love his children. I think that's all good. Nothing bad can come from that. But I was just reading about the history of dolls, and I think it's really cool. So it started in the dolls before they became composite started with porcelain dolls, and the porcelain dolls were very popular, even as far back as like the 13th and 14th centuries. But they were not, it was more difficult. You had to be more careful which child to give them to and how they played with them, because they were made out of porcelain and they could break easily. So, so that was, I'm sure a concern of parents back then. So when they came out with composite dolls, which were sort of like a really hard plastic, that was probably really relieving to parents, because, kids couldn't break them anymore. But a lot of kids didn't have composite or porcelain dolls because their parents either couldn't afford them, or, they didn't want to take a risk of them getting broken. I mean, we're talking about a lot of time periods when people needed to really focus their money on necessities and not on luxuries. And so mothers would often make their little girls' dolls out of socks, out of old clothes, hay, just many, many things. And, back then you had to have a lot of ingenuity, because I'm going to talk to you while I go over here and get a onesie. Because if you didn't have the money for the expensive ones, you had to come up with a way to, make it on your own. And so I think that parents back in the day were extremely creative in that they were able to find a way to have these toys for their kids without having to spend the money. So I definitely think that shows the ingenuity of the parents. Let me put Nala up here. So I think that's pretty cool, though, when you think about how creative parents had to get in order to get toys for their kids if they were not very wealthy. I mean, obviously, very wealthy parents. Here's Kieran. Obviously, just like today, very wealthy parents could afford anything for their kids. But if you weren't wealthy, especially during like other times, like during the Depression, or even earlier times when there wasn't a depression, but money was very scarce, especially when you have families like moving to different areas and all that, they had to make their kids toys. And I still think that's very cool. I just think it's very cool that parents did that for their kids. Oops, we lost a sock, which means it's probably still in here. Let me see. Yep, there it is. I would love to see examples like in real life, like in person, of parents who had to make their kids toys. I think that would be really cool. But I can't even imagine what kind of dolls they made 8,000 years, like we're talking 10,000 years ago, because that was 8,000 years BCE. And now we're 2000 AD. So if you add the 2000 to the 8,000, that's like 10,000. That would be pretty amazing. And even there were cave paintings of children playing with dolls back in like the caveman period, which I think is pretty cool. Reborns have, and this is what I know about reborns. I obviously, I've not done a ton of research, so I really don't know. I'm just kind of giving a guesstimate based on what I've heard people say. But I think Reborn started in the 1990s. I mean, there may have been some people painting dolls from like toy stores before that. But I think as a business, Reborns started to really get a foothold in the 1990s. And originally they were the Behringer dolls, or, other toy store dolls that were then painted and resold. I don't know when, let me see if it says on here, when they started making actual kits for reborning. I don't know. Let me see. Here's the Reborns. Let's see. So they had ball jointed dolls, and let me see. History of Reborn dolls. I'm curious when they started making kits that people could buy and paint. That's what I'm interested in. So the hobby of creating reborn baby dolls began in the early 1990s, so I was right about that. When doll enthusiasts wanted more realistic dolls. The art of making reborn dolls, in the 1990. Again, it started with the toy store dolls. It doesn't really say when they started making kits, but my guess would be probably in the early 2000s. If Reborn started in the 1990s, you would think it would take a few years for sculptors to get involved, So I would guess the early 2000s is when they probably started making kits for people to reborn. And the original kits were like the ball jointed dolls, So I think that's pretty cool. The history of dolls is something that I'm interested in. It's very cool. If I ever find a date when the first kits were produced, I'll definitely let you know. But it started with Behringer's, and they keep talking about an Apple Valley doll. Do you guys know what that is, Apple Valley? I'll have to look that up because it says that any type of vinyl doll can be used for reborning. Dolls vary in size, shape, and materials, making some more desirable or popular than others. According to Doll Reader magazine, Behringer Babies, Zapf, ZAPF, Lee Middleton, Apple Valley, and Secretus Dolls are the companies that make dolls which are easy to transform into reborns. Catherine Peck of Doll Reader magazine explains that with JC Toys Behringer Babies, it is because the dolls already resemble human babies in their expressions, body shape, surface materials, and other lifelike attributes. So it says, a reborn can be created from a blank kit as opposed to reborning a whole manufactured doll. So they're talking about kits now, but it doesn't say when the kits started. But I'll have to look that up and let you know, because I would be interested to know when the kits first came out. Anyway, yeah, so that's pretty interesting. Yeah, I'll have to figure out what the Apple Valley dolls are, because I haven't seen any. Let me see if you can tap on it so I can show you guys what an Apple Valley doll is. Let's see. Here we go. Apple Valley. Where is it? There it is. No, it's not showing me, so I'll put it in here. Apple Valley dolls. Let's see. I don't know if you guys know what an Apple Valley doll is, but I guess we'll figure it out together, huh? Here's Kieran. Look at him in this little teddy bear outfit. Doesn't he look cute? It's got little feet on it. Doesn't he look adorable? He does. He's so cute. I love this outfit. All right, let's see what the Apple Valley dolls look like. They almost look kind of like Secretus dolls. Here, I'll show you guys. So Apple Valley looks like it's a kit company, like Secretist. You guys can pause it and zoom in if you want to. These are Apple Valley. Here, I'll zoom in on a couple. So it looks like it's another early starting doll company that made reborns. Or that made the kits for reborns. So that's kind of cool. I never heard of that company, so I wasn't aware of them. See, like, here's a couple kits that haven't been rooted yet, but have just been painted. So they kind of look like the Secretist dolls or the ball jointed dolls. So that's kind of cool. I just thought we'd learn a little something about dolls today, because I thought that would be interesting. So yeah, but dolls were made from any materials, from, like I said, cloth, hay. I mean, even like people would take hay and like tie a string around like make a ball for the head by tying a string around it, and then use the corn husks or the hay using rope to like tie off separate areas to make, like, I'll show you. I actually saw a corn husk doll. I actually saw one that somebody made out of a corn husk that I thought was really cool looking. So like this would be like an example of a corn husk doll. Hold on, it's taking me to Etsy. No, go back. I don't want that. All right, let's see. All right, like here's an example of an old-time corn husk doll. Those are cool, huh? I think those are very cool. I think it's cool to see like antique stuff, you know, like here's like this is what I mean with the arms and legs, how they tied it off with rope to like give it the arms and legs effect. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, so they made dolls out of tons of materials. Here's a really cute one, a corn husk doll with a butter churn. And even the butter churn is made out of corn husk. That's pretty cool. I think it would be cool to have one of those, you know? Put on a shelf in your nursery. I think that would be super cool. Yeah, very cool. But we can see from looking at that how they used to do things, and it's pretty cool, you know. You have to commend the person who came up with that, you know, who figured it out that you could make a doll out of a corn husk or out of hay. That's pretty cool. Kieran is such a sweet boy. He's such a heavy boy. I love my heavy babies. Here's Kieran. Look at that little chunky monkey. Do you guys have a pickle kit? If so, what's the baby's name? I'm always interested. I love Pickle. It's one of my favorite kits. When Pickle was first released as a sneak peek, I knew I had to have a Pickle. And I actually bought 2 of the pre-order kits. And then I got these 2, so I still have 2 pre-order kits that I'm going to eventually get painted, but I just haven't done it yet. But I love this kit so much. It's such a chunky kit. Such a fatty. And it's so cute. Anyway, I just thought I'd do a quick video and say hi to you guys. Here's Kieran. Look at that little chunky face. Do you guys tell me if you have a pickle, and if you do, what the name is? And describe it a little bit, because I'm always interested in the pickles. I love the pickles. Alrighty, I'm going to let you guys run. I hope you have a great night. I'll see you in the next one. We're going to skip the prayer tonight, but we'll do it tomorrow. I'll see you in the next one, guys. Bye.